As Nigerians are left in the limbo over the suspended planned removal of fuel subsidy, the federal government, petroleum marketers, and other stakeholders have been thrown off balance in a quest to find a smooth transition that would not jeopardize the welfare of the citizenry. Already, the Nigerian Union of Petroleum and Natural Gas Workers cautioned the federal government not to contemplate the removal of subsidy on petrol without local refining capacity, given its social economic implications on businesses and Nigerians. Well, let's talk about this and look at it, at the implications of this move, this planned move by the federal government. And joining me to analyze this stand is a fiscal policy partner, an Africa tax leader at PricewaterhouseCoopers, Mr. Taiwo Oyedele. He joins us from South Africa, particularly Johannesburg in South Africa. Thank you so much. It's good to see you, Mr. Oyedele. Good afternoon.
Thank you very much, Tolu. It's good to see you too.
Thank you. I'd like to start very quickly with the implications of this. It's on two sides. Either we are retaining or we are removing. Both ours, but we need to take one of these ours. Now, what do you really think? Many are talking about implication on debt. Some are saying impact on the masses. There is a social and political aspect of subsidy removal. But in your understanding as a professional, how does this come to you? All of this retention and all of that. And also don't forget how it relates to the Petroleum Industry Act.
Yeah, thank you, Tolu. I think I would like to start by just even trying to advise the current government to maybe just hold actions about anything to do with subsidy removal, including the $800 million for palliatives. They just have a couple of weeks left. Since they haven't been able to do it in 8 years, then I think it's just right for them to wait for the next administration to think about this, so that whatever actions and interventions they want to provide is done within a context of a broader plan. The same thing, we heard we are removing, we are not removing, we want to borrow money so we can share to vulnerable people, we want to give pay rise to labor. Everything is disjointed. So it's better to have this as a holistic plan. And you're right, everybody is concerned about what impact this is having on debt, because not only is the amount we are spending on subsidy ridiculous, it's also the fact that that amount is denying government across all levels the revenue that they should be using to run government and provide social services. And that's making government to then borrow more. And the more we borrow, the higher the cost of servicing the debt, to the extent that for last year, 2022, it was reported that 96% of federal government revenue went into debt servicing. We also heard the numbers around the ways and means, over 22 trillion, which is also, not only is it a lot in terms of cost to service that debt, it's also fueling inflation. So all of these you can also attribute to a very large extent to the fuel subsidy. Now to your question, so people would easily say, don't remove subsidy because our lives will be more difficult. What we don't usually talk about is what will continue to happen if we don't remove the subsidy. So clearly, if you retain the subsidy, some of the implications would include the continuous drain on government revenue, which is now running into trillions and trillions of naira. The pressure on FX, the report that we saw recently, I think was either from the CBN or the MBS, shows that the number one demand on FX for Nigeria for last year was refined petroleum products, over $15 billion. Nigeria does not print dollars. So if the amount we're spending to import refined petroleum products is more than the dollars we are generating, if we run out of dollars, then we're going to have a subsidy removal regime that is not controlled, that is chaotic. Because what that means is government will have no means to import the quantity of fuel that we need. And people would actually beg to buy it at multiple of the market price. We don't want that to happen. We've seen that happen in places like Sri Lanka. So that's why we have to be responsible in how we address this. There's also the inefficiency and corruption that is being fueled by this, subsidy regime. Because, in just a couple of years ago, when the price of crude oil was down in the international market due to COVID-19, our consumption was just a little over 30,000. Now we're told it's about 33 million liters per day. Now we are told it's around 66, 70 million liters per day. I'm very confident that our real consumption is not anywhere close to that. And by the way, when the subsidy on diesel was removed some years back, the consumption went down by about 50%, to tell you that there's a lot of corruption and inefficiency that we are having to subsidize. Of course, there's the opportunity cost that you can't invest in that sector and you're losing employment, and then you're having to service debts, and you also have to have naira devaluation because of the pressure on FX, including the market distortion that we are seeing. So, but then if we remove it, what will be the implications? I think first and foremost, we're going to have a fairer idea of our true consumption, which I think is not up to what is being reported. So you have rational consumption, and people will be even more disciplined around how they use, petrol. The less pressure you're going to have on FX means that there will be more availability of foreign currency, one, to supply to critical sectors like manufacturing, and then Naira can actually appreciate if you reduce the demand on FX by rationalizing the consumption of petrol, which in itself can have an impact on inflation such that instead of inflation going up, inflation might actually moderate. Just imagine that if government, after removing the subsidy on petrol and they're able to save some dollars, they can give that dollar to the importers of diesel so that they have access to FX at the official rate. If you do that, it would easily reduce the price of diesel today by at least 20 to 30%. And, AGO diesel actually has more impact on inflation because in accounting, it goes into cost of sales and production costs than even petrol, which is more like below the line item that we call overhead. So, and then we're going to have some efficiency gains because once the market price is driving price with some, template from the regulator to make sure that the people are not exploited, you then start to see efficiency gain. We hear about the Dangote refinery that will soon be commissioned now, and we're all very excited and fingers crossed. That can help us save significant amounts on like the handling charges, which sometimes can be over 20% when you look at it. So overall, the way I see this is that even currently, while we are talking about removal of subsidy or don't remove, I think it's clear to me that we have to remove it. The conversation should be about how is the best way to do it so that the impact on the people is minimized from a negative point of view, and that we can maximize the positive impact on the economy and by extension on the people.
Well, that is, let me come in here, and that's where that argument of phased removal comes in, which some analysts have argued for some time, particularly at the time where the price of crude was pretty low. Many said would have taken advantage of that, but we didn't do that. But my question would also go in two folds. Now, one is the issue of deregulation. It's almost out of it now because removal of subsidy is just an aspect of deregulation. Now, if we buy diesel, some say for as much as 800, 900 naira after deregulation, kerosene, same. That is also the fear some Nigerians are nursing, thinking that the price of PMS could go as high, depending on Forex and all of that, since we are yet to fully refined in country. What will this mean when you say we ration our consumption? It's still expensive to buy. This might be negative on inflation and also economic growth.
Yeah, good question, Tolu. So if you look at it today, you look at countries like Ghana, you look at countries like Kenya, you look at countries like South Africa. So in Ghana, the pump price of petrol per liter as of today is around $1.10, $1.1. The same thing for AGO, that's diesel. Now, if you convert that into naira, and you convert the rate in Nigeria rather to dollars using the official rate, because they use the official rate for PMS, it comes to about 52 cents. Now, in Ghana, where they are selling 1 liter of petrol and diesel for about $1.10, they have 7 different taxes adding up to that amount, which is at least about 20%. If you take the taxes out, in Ghana, you end up with a per liter price of about 80 cents. Now, 88 cents. Convert that to Naira at the official rate, you would easily find that the amount we need to pay in Nigeria will be under 400 Naira for petrol if we deregulate and remove the subsidy. So therefore, it's always important for us to compare this with the rest of the world and even our neighboring countries, countries around us who are also importing fuel, who have the challenges that we have. So while I agree that government needs to do a phased approach to the removal of subsidy, what I would even argue is that what government needs to face in terms of removal is they have to start first by removing the corruption in the whole subsidy regime, then remove the inefficiency, then remove the subsidy. If you do this, you're going to find that by the time the subsidy is removed, the impact on the people will be minimal, because it's, by my calculation, using this data that is freely available to anyone, that the maximum increase in the price of PMS would be about 69%. What will happen to diesel is that it would actually decrease. So the price of diesel will go down, the price of petrol will go up, not more than 69%. Overall, because you've created efficiency and you have more dollars for critical sectors, you can then promote more investments, you can reduce government borrowing, you can reduce the debt service cost to revenue ratio, which is making the whole world to downgrade Nigeria and making it even more difficult to borrow. And when we borrow, is a very high rate. So at the end of the day, this just goes in many ways to show that it's a no-brainer that we have to do it. And I think the question should no longer be whether we want to remove or whether we are not removing. And all the demands by the labor union, sometimes I wonder whether there's data to support that. You want government to build refineries first. We've been on these refineries for how many years now? Refineries won't solve the problem. And we should also support the Dangote refinery to see how well that will help us reduce some of the costs, but certainly won't make the subsidy to go away, because it's not like, the cost of the landing cost today, excluding the handling charges, is still more than the pump price. So which means there's some level of subsidy that we have to face up to. And asking government to buy buses for workers, again, is going to be ineffective. Giving money to people in rural, villages and poorest people will not solve the problem. Government has to look for a way of addressing this issue, which in my view includes negotiate salary increases with workers to help them cushion the impact. Ensure that for the private sector and the rest of us, you adjust the exemption limit for PAYE. Today, if you earn more than 30,000 Naira, you pay PAYE. You can increase that amount to 50 or 60,000 so that the poorest people who have to commit to work back and forth, we have an extra amount of about 3,000, 4,000 per month that they no longer have to pay in PAYE, and they can use that to cushion the impact of their transportation cost. And then the excess, effects that you make from the subsidy removal by rationalizing consumption, give it for the purpose of diesel importation, and overall, you would have fixed such a massive problem that is setting Nigeria backwards without creating any dislocation in the economy.
Brilliant stuff there. But let's stay with refining now. Everyone is excited. By the 22nd of May, we expect the Dangote refinery to be commissioned. NNPC sits on that board, owning about 25%, I think, stake in that refinery. The Port Harcourt refinery is also, the word is rehabilitation. That's what we're told. $1.5 billion. I think that was from the AFDB or so, to also resuscitate or reactivate that refinery. Now, if we happen to get one or two of our refineries functional, side by side, Dangote refinery being functional, like you already alluded to, that might not be the end to the whole problems. So what positives do you think this brings on the table? What opportunities do functional refineries bring on the table for Nigeria's oil and gas industry?
Yeah, so for Nigeria to be able to refine locally is critically important, not only for domestic consumption. If you look at most of the countries in Africa, their number one import is also refined product. Maybe it's understandable because they don't produce crude oil. But refining locally is important. Enforcing or insisting that government has to be the one to do the refining is what I don't understand, because what we are trying to accomplish is to be able to get the lowest cost possible for our refined product, and also to ensure that this leakage and bleeding within the Nigerian revenue system, within the cost profile, within, even states are suffering from this, that we stop that. My view is that Nigerian government should stop trying to make the refineries work. They should just sell it to the private sector, because they've tried so many times. It hasn't been successful. Every time we have $1.5 billion, we have $1 billion here and there. We have 100 billion naira for maintaining nothing that is refining. At the end of the day, even when these refineries owned by government begin to refine, I suspect that their cost, ex-refining cost, will be higher than what you are getting now for the landing price at the port. So we should allow the investment to come in from the private sector, so that over time Nigeria can refine in a way that is competitive for both our market and for the international market. But it should never be a condition for us to remove subsidy now, that we have to wait until the refineries are working. It's another way of saying never remove the subsidy. But we're seeing that the trajectory and the trend we're seeing is that this is not sustainable. We've done it for so long. We cannot continue to do it for as long as we've done it in the past. Otherwise, we may just have a bigger crisis on our hands to manage.
Yeah, that's where I wanted us to wrap up this conversation. If we continue, as in the business world, the line that you use, business as usual, we think we can sustain this, considering the debt issues and what we face as a country. If we continue business as usual, in clear terms, in specifics, what might happen to us as a country?
Yeah. Okay. So I don't want to be the carrier of bad news, but I have to just be realistic. The fact that it's a drain on government revenue, we are spending higher costs to service debt. All those ones are smaller problems, because at the end of the day, if you don't have money, we'll print the naira to spend. The biggest problem that is not within our control is that to be able to bring in the refined products, we need dollars, and we do not print dollars because we are not America's government. So if we don't address this problem, we will run out of dollars. When you run out of dollars, it's disastrous. We saw what happened to Ghana when they could not service their debts in foreign currency. We saw what happened to Zambia. We saw what happened to Sri Lanka. We saw what happened to Argentina. When you run out of dollars, it will not be a good story at all to tell, because we have the opportunity now to do controlled removal of subsidy in a way that is organized and in a way that is systematic. If we don't do it, it will force itself on us in a way that will be difficult to control. And if care is not taken, it can easily lead to social crisis, because what will happen is the little petrol that you can import will be rationed. And of course, when you start rationalizing, the people that will get it, right? Which means that the ordinary man on the street will not even have access to even buy the fuel, whether it is expensive or not. You won't have access to it. And I pray that will not happen. But I think we need more than prayer. We need to take actions urgently.
Mr. Taiwo Oyedele, it's always great talking to you. Fiscal policy partner, Africa tax leader, PricewaterhouseCoopers. Mr. Taiwo Oyedele, thank you so much for your time. Let me allow you go back to your meetings. Do enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you for having me, Tolu.